What is the scariest situation you've been in and thought I'm not getting out of this alive? Serious. Was in Iraq on my last deployment and was conducting a foot patrol. As I pass a side street, the tailgate of a truck drops and there are two insurgents laying there with a machine gun who immediately open fire. The whole world slows down and seems to do one of those freaking Matrix things where you can see the bullets as I scream for everyone to take cover and run for cover myself. I felt my body jerk and yank around and almost fall off my feet several times until getting behind a building for cover. I just knew I was dead and could not feel the wounds because of the massive damage. Checking over my body, a canteen had been blown apart. A round had passed through a magazine pouch, destroying 3 magazines of ammo. I had 2 impacts that ripped up the cover of my helmet without punching through, and 1 round had passed through my uniform, across my chest, tearing at the inside of my body armor without touching me. 13 points of impact in all, and not a scratch on me. We later joked that death must have been on vacation. My insane cousin decided it would be fun to dangle me by my ankles over a 5-story balcony. I was 5. I just remember looking at the ground so far below me and screaming at the top of my lungs. It felt like hours, but probably only lasted a minute or 2. Then my dad saw what was happening and my cousin was grounded for the rest of vacation. When I was about 8, my much bigger, older cousin dunked me underwater and held me down. At first I struggled, but then I couldn't. I began breathing in water and was positive this was it. He finally let go and swam off. I bobbed up and began coughing/spitting out water, feeling like I was going to puke. I told my mom and she laughed at me for being dramatic. She was busy chatting up our relatives and hadn't even freaking noticed. My brother even tried vouching that I was underwater for a really long time and she just dismissed it, saying she saw me coming up for air multiple times. Edit. Holy frick, this blew up. I'll try to reply to as many people as I can, but please understand I'm completely overwhelmed with responses. I appreciate your empathy, and hearing other people's stories, while infuriating, is also gratifying to know I'm not alone. If anyone relates at all to my mum's reaction, and one of your parents treated you similarly all of your life, you may want to drop by /r/Ray, said the narcissists. I got caught in an avalanche while skiing in Colorado once. I was completely buried by the snow, so much so that it was like I was being suspended in the middle of the air. I couldn't even tell which way was up, mind you. I was around 7 at the time, so I didn't know the spit trick and began shouting for help. I wasn't even sure if anyone could hear me, but I just continually shouted my head off, hoping someone would be able to come rescue me. After a little while, I started to believe that this was how I die, stuck in a giant snowball. I was stuck for a good 5-10 minutes before I heard a search team treading through the snow. Their dogs must have picked up my scent or something, but I heard barking, and then the digging away of snow. Then, a foot brushed up against my boot, then my whole body was being forcibly pulled. The sun was blinding, and the world was spinning, as apparently I was facing downwards, so I got quite the head rush. I had never been so happy to see the sun before in my life. In 2004 I woke up and started coughing up blood. Not just a little bit of blood, but giant splatters of blood hitting the wall every time I coughed. Think of the movie Exorcism, but with blood and not pea soup. I immediately had a panic attack and thought that I was going to die. I woke up my mom to get help and tell her goodbye. She called the ambulance, and I spent the next 7 days in the intensive care unit. Eventually, they found that I had a serious infection that, as the pulmonologist put it, shredded my right lung. The infected tissue tore off of my lung and fell to the bottom where it abscessed. Every time it moved, the abscess would rip the artery in my lung open, and I would cough up about a liter of blood. The doctor had to cut 18 pieces of my lung out. Luckily, I survived, but I get short of breath easily. A bunch of adventurous co-workers decided to take skydiving lessons. Couldn't pass that up. We did a few hours of underground training, and then they packed us into a tiny plane 4 at a time, clipped our ripcords to the plane, and we jumped out at about 2,500 or 3,000 feet. It was a static line jump, meaning that the plane opened your parachute for you as you fell away. It was one of the best feelings I'd ever had, and I went back on my own the next week. I couldn't talk anyone into coming though, so it was just me. I signed up for an accelerated course that involved a lot more ground training and 3 tandem jumps where you clip up to an experienced jumper and they teach you how to maneuver, engage your control and focus, and then you get cleared for jumping solo. It all went great, and after a couple more weekends I was doing solo jumps and working on turns and having some of the most intensely awesome experiences of my life. On my 10th jump, I went out at around 12,000 feet and started trying to figure out how to do something other than turning and tracking. I'd drop the shoulder and the world would start spinning all over, and it'd come back and try it again. I wasn't getting the hang of it at all and kept trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. All of a sudden, I realized that I had gotten distracted and had completely forgotten about altitude. I hadn't checked my altimeter once the entire time. I didn't have a sense of how long it'd been falling. I was in the middle of a tumble, and the ground, or what I could see of it as it was flashing up then down then sideways then behind me, seemed really close. Closer to me than it ever had before. I looked at my altimeter, but I had an overwhelming sense of urgency to make a decision. So rather than take the time to read and understand it or stabilize myself, I went for the ripcord. I was upside down and at an angle. When my chute popped up, it had been packed very loosely, and when the risers went taut, one of them wrenched my neck pretty good and twisted my helmet 90 degrees, smashing my nose into my face and blinding me. I flailed around unable to see anything, not knowing if my chute was open or garbage, trying to get my helmet unstuck. Even more than being scared that I was going to die, I remember feeling a profound sadness that it was my own stupidity that got me there. Panic helped me untwist the helmet, and it really hurt. My nose did not want to be smashed back the other way, but a desire to know how many seconds I had left was a strong motivator. I was still 1,200 feet above the ground. What an idiot. Overall, it was great fun, but I got all the excitement I needed out of skydiving and haven't been back. Maybe someday. I was taken to the emergency room and septic shock from an abscessed tooth. I had been having a toothache for a few weeks, but it wasn't so bad. I woke up that morning in so much pain I thought my eye was going to fall out, and then I don't remember much more until I was in a hospital bed being pumped full of drugs and fluids to get my blood pressure back up. I crashed again during the CT scan and I really thought I was going to die. It was so scary. I had just had the contrast dye put in me and thought I had peed myself, and then my blood pressure bottomed out again. My last thoughts were I'm about to die in a puddle of piss. I don't remember again until my parents were there. They told me what had happened, and a nun came in and told me her church was paying my hospital bill. 3 days later I woke up in my bed at home hallucinating an alligator was at the foot of my bed. I devised a plan to leap out of bed and onto my dresser all the floor is lava style. It didn't work. I crumpled into a heap on my floor, and my boyfriend came in and filled me in on what all happened. I had literally almost died. It really changed my whole life. At first it really messed me up, and I can't say I'm not still kind of screwed up from it, but in all it was for the better. It got my life back on track and great things are about to happen. Climbed a 14,000 foot mountain in the middle of winter. Got stuck in a freak snowstorm and spent 3 days soaking wet and shivering in a tent with 2 friends as the snow piled 4 feet high. Ended up being rescued by search and rescue. The 3 of us got pretty close during that trip in more ways than one. Man, storms on mountains are so scary. It's crazy how they aren't scary at all in a town, but on the mountain orange it's like staring at death. I was in a 6-hour lightning storm with insane amounts of wind and rain at 5,000 to 6,000 feet. You couldn't speak to each other because of the noise, or see because it was like a billion strobes lighting up the landscape every couple seconds. The wind was collapsing my tent and the rain was getting trough the fly and showering us with a fine pulverized mist. No idea how we didn't get struck. I'm just glad that unlike snow you can leave after the lightning is done taunting you. I would have gone crazy in your situation. Hopefully it never happens to me. Stuck on a chairlift on a ski hill in the middle of a blizzard, 100 feet over a ravine. Was 14 at the time. A storm moved in and they were shutting down the mountain. I begged the lift operator to let me do one more run. He relented and I went up. 5 minutes later the lift stopped moving. Before the whiteout closed in, I could see that I was parked over a rocky ravine, about 100 feet below me. As the minutes ticked by, and then a couple hours, it became clear to me that they'd forgotten all about me. Temps plummeted, wind picked up, and my core temp started dropping. Options were few: raise the bar and fall to my death, or stay on the lift and die of hypothermia. I considered crawling up the chair and trying to make it to the cable above, then shimmy to the next tower, then down to safety. That all sounds like an easy, simple choice when you're sitting in your living room. It'd feel like sure death when you're sitting in the lift. Fortunately, when I didn't return home that night, my parents started calling around and eventually figured out where I was. In the wee hours of the night, I could hear a tracked grooming vehicle going up the mountain. I knew they had to be looking for me. Half an hour later, the lift started moving again, and a SAR team met me at the top. Frostbite on the toes of my right foot and both my hands, but lived to tell about it. For a long time there I was absolutely convinced I'm not getting out of this alive.
N.
Rockslide in Yosemite National Park. I worked in the park and lived in the valley in a rockslide prone area. One night right before bed I heard what sounded like thunder, but remembered the sky was perfectly clear when I entered my tent just minutes earlier. I ran out of my tent and into a chaotic scene. My fellow employees panicked and were running/falling downhill as the sound of thunder grew closer and closer. I hid behind the largest boulder I could find and expected rocks to come rolling past me any second. The sound was intense, frightening, and seemed to close in on my location with each passing moment. I thought it was the end. It seemed a decent way to die. What felt like minutes, but was likely just seconds. Later the rockslide stopped. I barely slept that night. Some employees needed stitches from cuts sustained during their flight, but otherwise no one was hurt. In the morning a couple of us went looking for the devastation and found the slide stopped roughly 100 yards from our tents. I felt very fortunate to have lived through that one. I got caught on a cliff top while snowboarding. 50-meter fall down onto rocks. No way of undoing my binding or climbing up to safety. I was stuck until 6 PM, where I got airlifted out by helicopter after being stuck for 3 hours. First time I have truly feared for my life. Edit. I got stuck just above the cliff. If I had moved I would have fallen. As a kid playing on train tracks, my mom starts shouting at me. I looked behind me and there is a train bearing down on me. Someone ran up there and pulled me off, but I was just stunned and couldn't move. I was in a car accident with my dad once actually. I've been in like 4 with him, but we were waiting at a red light. When it finally turned grey we started to go forward, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a van coming from the right that looked like it was going too fast to stop at its red light. I shouted oh my god, because there was really nothing else I could do as a passenger, and my dad slammed on the brakes, making us run into the side of the van. It still kind of shakes both of us, because if I hadn't called out, my dad wouldn't have braked, and I would have been hit instead of us hitting the van that was going 45 miles per hour. Not a particularly long story, but around age 9, an older and much larger kid at some after school daycare thing held me underwater at the pool. I immediately panicked, thrashing and struggling with this kid's slab of meat of a hand calmly holding my head just below the surface. After a minute or so I couldn't hold my breath any longer and inhaled a bit of water. For whatever reason I stopped thrashing, became very calm, and pushed away from the kid with my feet, deeper into the pool. The kid let go of my head, and I made it back to the surface where I proceeded to vomit, cry and cough up water for the next 10 minutes or so. TL. Doctor, day camps are a great way for your kids to exercise and meet new friends in a safe and well supervised environment. While going to Fresno State University I moved into some apartments right off the school. They were right next to the university on Bulldog Lane, which I later found out it was known as one of the more dangerous places in the area. So I had this CAD class at night while in college, and class was around 3 hours long. It would usually end at around 10 at night, and I had no car, so I would have to walk alone for a good half a mile off campus to my apartment. One night class took a little longer, and I ended up walking home at midnight. So I make it to the apartments, lock gates and notice some suspicious guys waiting outside the gate. I was already scared and suspicious about them, but I decided to just ignore them and walk in. Right before I make it to the door they stop me and ask me if I wanted to buy meth. I just ignore them at first and put in the code to the gate. As I walk in they ask again and I just say no. My dumb ass never thought that now I opened the gates to the apartments and they can follow me to my place. So I just try to walk normally to my place while trying to not shoot my pants as they're following me. Next thing I know 2 more guys are in front of me. They pull out a knife and point it at me. The guys behind me then ask me, "You sure you don't want any?" I can't remember exactly what my response was. All I can remember was it was some sarcastic ass joke about what choice did I have. The guys behind me take out the drugs and ask for my wallet. Me all scared I just give it to them. He looks inside and laughs. Being in college, money is not something my wallet was familiar with. I did however have my school ID, some coins, and a condom. He pulls out a gun and says, "No cash on you, and you still think you getting laid? Lucky you I don't got ammo on me today, so make that condom useful." He gives my wallet back and just dips. Ambushed by 2 Taliban raid, local assholes/criminals with RPK machine guns from about 60 meters away. Myself and 4 other guys were dismounted from our MRAP looking for command wires on a stretch of Highway 1 in Ghazni province, AFG. We have to hop over this mud wall into a grape field in order to keep moving parallel to the road. As I'm going over the wall, I think to myself, wow, this would be a really shooty place to get ambushed. We were effectively isolated from our vehicles which had crew-served weapons in a wildin field. Not good. But we had to go in there to look for the wires. We had gotten hit in this area before. So we walk. No more than 2 minutes after we cross that wall crack. Crack 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 crack. I could feel the first round fly right in front of my face. It was like feeling a kind of overpressure right in front of your face. Kind of like if you have ever had a baseball thrown really close to you and you can feel it passing by. Anyway, there were 2 machine guns shooting at us from 2 different angles. We were cut off from the rest of our platoon, so we had no crew-served weapons to bail us out. To make a long story short, we ended up shooting and grenading our way out of that field and somehow no one on our side got hurt. Ended up with a bullet hole in the shoulder pocket of my uniform. Rough day. My husband was out of town, and I woke up to a man standing at the foot of my bed. I thought to myself calmly, so this is how I die. I forgot that I had dragged my elliptical trainer into the bedroom to make room for more shoot in the living room. A jacket draped over gym equipment makes for an ominous figure. There's these artificial rapids near where I live that people go down in inner tubes. Some people go down without a tube. You just have to be a very strong swimmer. Apparently I overestimated myself. I got caught right in the rapid and couldn't break free. I clawed my way to the surface and got just a gasp of air. Then I was taken back under and didn't come back up until I was out of the rapids. Water is scary. Hiking and camping in South Turkey with my girlfriend. We're from England, so the concept of a wild animal being potentially harmful to me is both foreign and terrifying. So, we're extremely rural. At the last village we were in, we actually found someone who spoke English. During our conversation, he mentioned we should be careful due to the wild bears. We'd read that there were only wild bears in the northeast of Turkey, but figure well pay some heed to an actual local. Especially when he's the first English speaking person we've met for a couple of weeks. That night, having just drifted off, I was awoken by my so gently tapping me and whispering my name in the most terrified voice. So, as I emerge from the fog of sleep, here are the facts I come to terms with in about 1 second. My girlfriend is terrified. We're miles from anyone. There is something growling outside of the tent. That guy we spoke to earlier said there were bears. There's a goddamn bear outside the tent. The situation was only worsened by having an opaque tent, hence not being able to see the imminent threat, plus the confusion of just waking up. Anyway, I entirely froze in fear, like, whole body went stiff. No one around, nothing to use as a weapon. Man, I was even but naked. I was going to die naked. This lasted about 5 seconds. Then I heard the snort. It was a boar, rummaging around. TL. Doctor, bulls, whilst being scary, are ultimately much more preferable over bears. A few weeks ago we had a surprise snow squall hit on my way to work. Driving on the interstate, going maybe 50 miles per hour cause it doesn't seem so bad yet. Suddenly I'm going kinda sideways in a skid. Holy shoot. Swerved the other direction. Managed to get back into a straight line, but I'm still going 45 to 50 with my momentum. Car ahead of me brakes. I wasn't too close to him, so I'm not worried yet. Start to pursue brake. Nothing is happening. The brakes work, but the freaking car isn't slowing down. I'm skidding again, just in a straight line this time. I'm really coming up fast on this guy now. Holy shoot, I can't stop. I actually said it out loud. I can't stop, I can't stop. And then I got the tiniest bit of traction underneath an overpass and came to a halt about 3 inches from the dude's bumper. I think he must have been sliding too, because there's no way I wouldn't have slammed into this guy if he was slowing down at a normal rate. That shoot was scary. My 2 friends and I were on spring break in Panama City, Florida 3 years ago. We were all in our late 20s, I'm married, so the party scene didn't jive with us anymore. We ended up going to a dive karaoke bar on the outskirts of town. At the end of the night, my friend was super hammered and didn't want to pay for a taxi back. He flagged down this shooty pickup truck and climbed in the back seat. My other buddy and I didn't want to ditch him. I wish we did. As soon as we got in the truck I knew we were in trouble, because the driver was an emaciated guy with greasy, oily hair with his equally emaciated and toothless girlfriend sitting in the passenger seat. They were clearly crack or meth heads. She proceeded to pull a handgun on us and told us to empty out our pockets. We had maybe a $100 to give them. They told us they'd let us go after they made their drug deal with our money. Well, the freaking driver starts arguing like crazy with his girlfriend, saying, "I run this shoot, you don't run this operation. I'm the kingpin." She starts sobbing hysterically with the gun pointed right at us, him in the middle seat. I literally thought one of us was going to die Pulp Fiction style. My friends and I, rather adept at singing Sublime, pacified the meth heads by singing Garden Grove and Santeria in the backseat. They calmed down and actually recorded us on their cell phone. They were so pleased with our vocal performance. I hold out hope that I can get my hands on that recording. After that they were cool as could be. They made their drug deal and dropped us off at the hotel we were staying at. After that night, we ended up coming up with the band name KFC, which means karaoke for crackheads. TL. Doctor hitchhiked in a pickup truck, got robbed at gunpoint, but saved the day by singing Sublime songs.